Well, hello, folks. You're with Jamin on the Insecurity Project. I have the privilege today of interviewing my friend Johnny Pawlik. Johnny and I are only friends recently, but when I first got introduced to Johnny through a mutual friend, instantly I found a kindred soul. He's the guy who's doing some amazing work in the world, and super interested to interview him and to share his story on the show today. So Johnny's the founder and CEO of the international branding and marketing firm Mantra Media, and the co-founder of the Japanese luxury retail brand Atelier Japan. He's currently the ambassador for Investors in Community, a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts and Commerce, a guest chair for the Intelligence Forums, and a member of Deloitte's Climate Action Coalition. That's a pretty extraordinary bio right there. Johnny, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jamin. It's a pleasure and a privilege.
I'm going to start, as I start with all of my guests, back to where it began for you. I'm fascinated by your upbringing and particularly the impact your parents had on you and the role they played early on in shaping your self-esteem and your belief about yourself. Tell us what it was like growing up in your home.
So I grew up in a council estate in the Midlands in the 80s, which was not fun, particularly where we were. Everybody we were surrounded by were, we're doing things that weren't productive for society. So there was lots of drugs, there was lots of violence, there was lots of not very enjoyable things happening around me when I was a child. But there is one thing that stood out particularly well. There's a few things that stood out particularly well, which helped me build my self-esteem, resilience, and understanding my values as well. The first instance, I must have been about 3 or 4 years old. I was really, really young, and I was in Tesco's, and of all places. And my mum was walking with me, and I was walking really early. I could do lots of things really early as a baby, and one of my mum knew said, "Oh, so how's little Johnny doing then?" And my mum straight away said, "Well, ask him." And this woman was like taken aback by this, and my mum was like, "He can speak for himself." and it was that thing. And my mum always treated me as an adult, essentially. You've got an opinion, it's valued. So even though we grew up in a place that was, every day I walked outside literally the front of the house, I had to make sure that I wasn't going to walk on syringes. Some days I couldn't go to school because there was a random Rottweiler, just in front of our front garden, and nobody knew who it was owned by. There was random dogs everywhere that would chase you. I mean, it was pretty dire. I described some of the situations to people now. I mean, I remember there was some kids on the council estate had a water fight, and one of the kids filled his water gun with boiling water from the kettle. It was there was a lack of education, there was a lack of support. So my mum giving me that voice, and I think me noticing, actually, maybe this isn't the way that people should live. You shouldn't live in fear. I have scars all over my knuckles and it's weird to think that now in the position that I'm in now, but growing up was a literal fight. And it was because of where we were brought up. So yeah, a sense of injustice, a sense of wanting to fight for justice, a sense that no one is going to help you. My mum always gave me a lot of love, but there was this thing of, you've got to go out there and get it because no one is going to help you.
Wow. So you were in an environment where everyone had that same experience, but then clearly not everyone took that experience the way that you've taken it and leveraged it to create strength and resilience. So I'm fascinated by how you did that, and whether that was always natural, or whether there were times where you thought it was impossible to actually better yourself or better the world. Whether there are times where you wondered whether you had what it took, whether you were good enough to break free from that world and to create a better world around you. Can you tell us a bit about how it was that you kind of got from there to here?
So I think I remember one summer holidays, and I had an encyclopedia, and for some reason I decided I was going to do this huge project over that summer where I would learn everything about certain things in this encyclopedia and rewrote all the things that I was learning from this encyclopedia. And that was my entire summer. 6 weeks of just reading and writing, reading and writing, reading and writing. And I think there's accumulation of things that just worked. I think, yeah, you're exactly right. Most of the people that grew up in that environment either ended up in prison or dead. I am an anomaly from that area. I think the love of my mum, unconditional love of my mum was definitely a factor that helped. I think I always had an incredibly inquisitive brain. And maybe there is a natural selection genetic component to that. I mean, I recently did my genetics, right? And genetically, I am a huge mix. I'm a real big mix. And I was the only kid on the estate with a foreign name. And, there was, so I don't know if there's that kind of thing, but they say that a lot of skills and finding different ways of doing things come from either inspiration or desperation, right? And I think for me, it was seeing the things around me, seeing, kids on drugs, seeing, I remember, and it was almost like I was born with this moral compass. I remember one time, I must have been about 7 years old, walking outside of the home, and there was 3 kids similar age to me, just peeing in the middle of the street, in the middle of the day. I mean, in the middle of the day, just peeing in the street. And it's an example of people don't understand. They really don't understand what that environment is like. And that's the UK. That's the UK. People don't understand there are areas of the UK that are untouched by city officials, untouched by councils, and they're just leave it, and it becomes ghettoized. And the things that happen there, people just do not realize. I think there was another instance. So there was a girl who was a similar age to my sister at the time, must have been about 9 years old or something like that, and she was raped, and she only lived a few doors down. And my mum was like, we can't live here. We cannot live here anymore. We have to move. And so when I was a teenager, we moved. We managed to get into a nice area, a safe area, where we didn't have to worry about any of the things that we were worrying about when we were on the council estate. And that was really interesting because that area was safe, but completely, there was no sense of community. Where I was, it was rough and it was kind of dog eat dog, but there was this kind of sense of loyalty or community. Whereas this other place, people had nice cars and, it was totally different, but there was no sense of community. You didn't know your neighbors really. And it was interesting because for me, you know, being 13 years old, I was kind of like, this is all wrong. There was something within me that went, this is wrong. This doesn't make sense. And I remember a kid I knew, same age as me, who was at school, and you could tell, you know, when you're at school and you could tell that kid's having a hard life. Like there are problems at home. And his name was Robbie, and you know, he was a nice enough kid, but he was off the rails, and school just didn't know what to do with him. And we were friends. We used to play football together, you know, like when we were like 13. And I remember worrying about him, walking home from school one day on my own, and I was worried about him, like, because I'd been to see where he lived, and it was kind of similar to where I used to live. And I saw, you know, that you'd walk in the house and there was just a billowing of smoke, because his dad was a chain smoker, constant chain smoker. You know, his parents never worked, and things like that. And it made me think, gosh, if he doesn't get the right influences, and I remember thinking, I was 13. I remember thinking, if he doesn't get the right influences, he's going to go down the wrong road, and he did. And there was another kid I grew up with who we used to get into fights all the time at school, always get into fights. He was kind of like my arch nemesis at school. And when we left school, I was doing pretty well. You know, I was very much kind of self-made. I was running these little businesses. I was doing well for myself. And he decided to, you know, what options does a kid have in an area like that unless something else is going on? The army, right? That was kind of the go-to for kids in that area. And he went into the army. And when I was at university, he was killed in Afghanistan. So it was such a sad thing, really, because that was all because of because I found out about his background and stuff. And, you know, he had a very abusive background, and, you know, he didn't have to go down that route. So yeah, it makes me think about all that kind of thing.
Yeah, wow. So in your own journey, you know, coming from where you did and developing an understanding of the world that you're in and the world that you desire to be in, and the part you're going to play in that world, did you always feel confident that you could make a difference? Or do you think, were there times where were there times where insecurity got in the way? I think that's always interesting for people to hear. People who are successful and doing great work in the world, it's always useful to unpack whether they always felt like that. So I'm curious. So
particularly in a class-based system like the UK, you are taught to hold your stature. This stratification that you've been given from birth, this is where you belong. You're working class, or you're underclass, or you're middle class, or you're this. And you won't move up. You can go down, but you can't go up. So when I went to university, everyone around me, you know, I was the poor kid at university. You know, I got into the university of a mixture of grants. I was the first in my family to go to university. I actually got into university, like the first bit, you need to financially have, you know, a bit. And the only way I could afford that was a mixture of me working and you know, running one of my first businesses, and actually a friend who came from a wealthy background. He himself actually, you know, lent me money to start university. So I think there are a few things. I think when I was at university, there were lots of people who had very good educations who had been given a lot, and that status, that gap of status, and particularly with lecturers and things like that, you always think they're superhuman, like just like your parents. When you're a kid, you're like, my parents know everything. Parents know everything.
Yeah.
You know, and we carry on that throughout life. We think that people are older than us, or people they're going to be endued with some kind of benevolence and the all-seeing eye. So benevolence and some kind of divine authority. And we know, and as we get older, we realize actually everyone's just human. Most people don't know what they're doing, who they are, why they are, or what their values are. So yeah, I had to fight through myself and through the system. If you look at all the metrics of where I am today compared to where I started in life, I'm an anomaly. People say there's a myth that anyone can get anywhere in life. I do think it's actually a myth. I think there are ingredients that you need. And if kids don't get those ingredients, they're not going to get there. You know, I'm on the board of various children's charities and social services. So I know firsthand the data. And the data says that if kids don't get this kind of support, this kind of intervention, X, Y, and Z, they will go down the wrong route. So I think for me, seeing the injustice and those two different worlds from, you know, the council estate to a nice area, and thinking this is unfair, and having a natural empathy. I was always naturally empathetic, and I had a love of others. I just love other people, and want to help people. That's just part of me. It's, you know, I don't know if it's something I was just born with, but I desperately want to help everyone around me. I think everyone should be given the chance for fulfillment and the opportunity to achieve something that's meaningful for them. So I fought at university. I fought through my own barriers of feeling secure when kids had gone to Eton and they'd you know, daddy owned a yacht and all that kind of thing, and you know, and mine couldn't have been further from that. And yeah, there were times where I felt insecure of like, are people going to take me seriously? Is my voice valid? And you know what actually worked was mortality. Mortality. That's the thing that gets me past every single barrier. Every single barrier. I actually had this conversation at the weekend. If you feel the fear of doing something because you feel that you're not good enough, or that you've not done your research and you don't realize that, well, actually, everyone had a journey to get there. That barrier, the easiest way, you're not going to be here for very long. Time moves quickly. Mortality is the best motivator. Anytime I feel my self-esteem go down, I think, well, I could choose not to go for that. I could choose not to try and do for that. We're all going to die soon. It's a great leveler. So does it matter anyway? Matters to me. Might not matter to the world, but I'm not going to be around very long anyway, so why not? And that, sorry, go on.
Well, no, yeah, so that's, I've never heard anyone use that so powerfully. So it's kind of like, well, it doesn't really matter if it goes well or if it doesn't go well. I'm not really going to be here for long anyway. So there's nothing to lose.
It matters to you.
Yeah.
It matters to you. People, success should be about this. It should be about, yeah, you can have nice things and you can be comfortable, and but really it's fulfillment. Success is for fulfillment, right? Am I living my, do I know what my values are? Am I living them every day? And am I doing something with purpose? Am I living a purpose? If you're following your values, you will find purpose in what you're doing. And the outcome of purpose, fulfillment.
Yeah, sure.
If I'm doing something that is purposeful every day, I will feel fulfilled. And it's not meant to be easy. If life didn't make you grow, then what is the point? Don't ask for an easy life. Ask for a fulfilling life. Ask for one with challenges. And this is, again, a thing that people don't realize, is that it's the hard work, it's the grit, it's the overcoming things that gives you that, I did that, I achieved that. It felt impossible at one point. Now I've done it. That is, it's so important. And I think people, generally, you look at a lot of business magazines and things, people focus just on the monetary metrics, the personal wealth. And I always say, well, okay, that's fine, but what are you going to take with you? You can accumulate all the wealth in the world, but a week before you pass from this earthly realm, what are you going to think about? Are you going to think about the numbers in your bank, or are you going to think about who you are and what you've given and who you became and the things that you overcome?
Yeah, it's so true, and such a useful message for people to think about, and just take a step back from their current way of operating, and to think about fulfillment, about meaning, about purpose, about time, about what it's all about. I think they're always useful conversations. They always draw us into a bigger mode of living and a more effective mode of living. So I'm curious around your purpose, and when you think about what gives you the most fulfillment, when you think about you showing up and bringing you a gift, can you tell us a bit about the work that you're doing in the world, and your best understanding of what your purpose really is?
So in one word, impact, in a sentence, to create what I deem as positive impact on the world. So if I can give people opportunities that they didn't have or didn't felt that they deserved, that's a win. If I can help small communities that are struggling, that's a win. I'll give you some examples of that in practice. So in 2016, I met with lots of independent makers in Japan. The domestic market was being squeezed because the birth rates are declining, which is an effect of just an advanced modern society. All advanced modern societies, birth rates decreasing. And it's because people make different decisions as the education system improves, people start to learn who they are and what they're about. Again, things we talk about, purpose and fulfillment. They realize actually they're not built to just pump out babies every day. They're actually built to do something with significance and enjoy the process of living. So meeting these independent makers where they're not making the sales, and Japan is very adverse to change. They move very slowly, but when they make a decision, they move at speed. But it's getting to that decision. So I toured with my business partner, who's Japanese, around lots of different places. We met with lots of people, and we just went, well, why don't we help all these independent makers? I run an international branding and marketing firm, and our whole thing is we're driven by ethics, guided by knowledge. And the idea about that is that we will only work with organizations that have clean supply chains and that are doing good in the world. So, and so they have to have transparent supply chains. We have to be able to see how they do things. And all these independent makers, they're family-run businesses. The materials are sourced locally. Everything you could think about, that's a sustainable, in every sense of the word, business. So we said, look, we're going to help you expand globally. We formed a brand called Atelier Japan. It's atelierjapan.com. And we now sell products from these independent family-owned makers that some of them have been going for nearly 1,000 years. Nearly 1,000 years. People don't realize Japan has a massive amount of companies over 300 years old. There's just tons of them. And what the fan maker, Komburia, the fan maker we work with, is just under 1,000 years old, 900 and something years they've been going. And these are family businesses. I mean, I've got a photo of a chap at a tea company in Kyoto, and he's stood next to this, portrait, but it's old school portrait of his great grandfather 50 generations back. And he's now inheriting the company. And you think, wow, that's incredible. Imagine if the rest of the world could be like that. So they were having some challenges. The government helps them a lot. The government helps independent companies a lot because they want to keep their heritage. And I, me and my business partner launched this brand in 2016. Since then, we keep expanding our product range. We have hundreds of products on there now. And it's all, luxury, ethically made Japanese products. And, most of these products you can't get anywhere in the world. So it's kind of, it's unless you go to those independent studios in Japan. Recently, we formed a partnership with the Kyoto Prefectural Government because they loved what we were doing. We've also got a partnership with County Hall London opposite Westminster, and we're going to have a retail space in London as well, hopefully this year, so COVID willing. So yeah, it's so that's kind of that's I guess long form example of us doing what we believe in action. Just to give you a couple of examples.
Yeah, amazing.
In early 2020, we launched a national campaign for a women's charity called Together Women, where we created online graphic novels that taught young girls how seemingly innocuous conversations can lead to malevolent situations, to combat abuse in certain communities in the UK. That was the most successful campaign they've ever had. In their words, more young girls reached out for support than ever before, and we know we saved lives. Another campaign, we worked alongside the UK government, this was back in 2017, we diversified mentorship in British schools. We created a national campaign around mentorship, and the idea was to diversify the people who would go in and work with kids. We've got tons and tons of examples. We've worked with the RSPCA, where we massively increased donations and adoptions of animals. It's, the cases we do, again, time and time again, is around supporting people. We toured Australia, 4,500 kilometers across the outback with the Invictus athletes, meeting ex-servicemen and women and people who've been in, the fire service, the police service, who, suffer from PTS. We worked with those people, getting them the psychological support that they need. We're a marketing firm, but we're a little bit different.
Do you ever sleep?
I sleep better than I've ever slept in my life, and I think I don't sleep as much. I don't need as much sleep these days. I think more than anything, it's just getting my diet right. A super specific diet, which you kind of need when you're like really, really busy, I think.
Wow. I don't know whether there have been key books along the way for you that you recommend or you gift or you go back to. I love books and I refer to them frequently. So I'm always fascinated by books that have stood out for you and you could recommend. Are there certain books that you think are useful for people to draw them out of themselves into finding their purpose, to help them overcome their insecurity, both the cultural insecurity and their personal insecurity? What books do you love?
There's two that I think are kind of required reading to be human, or maybe two books and a poem. So Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Frankl was a psychoanalyst who survived the Nazi concentration camps, and he spent his time in Auschwitz analyzing people, who's surviving, who's not surviving, why, what are they doing psychologically that's different. That is a beautiful book, and that book teaches you to put things in perspective and really focus on purpose. Because the thing that, to kind of give the cliff notes, what he found was that the people who survived the concentration camps found purpose in the horror. The second book is As a Man Thinketh by James Allen.
Okay.
As a Man Thinketh, beautiful little book. It was written, I think, about 200 years ago, and it's really random. It was written by, I think, a chap in Leicester, and it's kind of a long form poem, but there's some magic in those words. It's where the phrases of, man maketh a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven, things like that came from that book. That you find that, the big kind of coaches that are out there, like Tony Robbins, Deepak Chopra, all those kind of guys. Those guys, a lot of the things they say are in that book. They don't tell you, but
Sure.
it all comes from that. It's something magic about that book.
Wow. Okay.
And the third piece, which is kind of a long form poem, is The Marriage of Heaven and Hell by William Blake. The Marriage of Heaven and Hell by William Blake is just beautiful. It's a precursor to Freudian psychoanalytic theory. The idea of the superego and the ego, and that fight within us, because regardless of these things about values, fulfillment, purpose, we are still animals. And you will always going to be, you have to accept there is, as Jung calls it, the shadow. There is a darkness that follows all humans, which is our, I perceive it to be the animalistic self. It's nihilistic, and it's quite dark. And you have to confront that and be comfortable with it and realize that, okay, we all have immense potential for good and bad. Once we become comfortable with that, we can then go out in the world and go, okay, I'm going to make the decisions that impact people in the best way possible, because I choose to do that. I choose to make the world a better place, but accepting that you will always come with faults, because you're a sack of mush. People have this concept of the self, like, I am this unitary solid thing. You're really not. You're an absolute mess inside. So it's that thing. It's putting things into perspective, isn't it? So yes, the Marriage of Heaven and Hell is a beautiful book, because it's about accepting we are a mixture of all the great virtues of charity and prudence, blah 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 blah, but we're also all the bad stuff as well. And as long as our actions follow our values, that hopefully are all about the good stuff. And don't get me wrong, there's tons and tons and tons of people in business who are kind of complete opposite, who are completely nihilistic. But it's your choice. All choice.
Yeah, wow, that is beautiful. All right, so is there anything that we've missed in your mind in terms of people who are limited by their own insecurity, who are sitting on the capacity to make an impact in the world and bring a contribution, but have never allowed themselves to step up and out because of the fear that they might fail or they might be found out as inadequate or they're not good enough. Are there any parting words that you would say to those people from your own experience to draw them out of themselves into a bigger and more impactful experience of life?
Yeah, it actually comes from Einstein. I love his phrase, the definition of insanity: doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. Mm. And if you question yourself and think, I can't do that, so I won't do it. I can't do it, so I won't do it. I can't do it, so I won't do it. Okay, are you going to get the same outcome? Because I think you're not going to move. Yeah. I think you're going to stay exactly where you are. Mm. If you try something different, if you go, do you know what if I believe in myself today? What if I try? What if I do that? Yeah. And then you go, well, it might not work. Okay, where will you end up? Exactly where you are right now. Mm. So you can stay where you are and not make an effort. You can make an effort and it not work and stay where you are, which you seem to be comfortable at anyway. Or you could make an effort and it works, God forbid, and actually your life moves forward.
Yeah.
And if they need a little bit of a prod, then I bring it back to mortality. Well, what if you tried and it worked and you died in a week? At least you did it right. It's so powerful. It's so powerful. Telling people they're gonna die. and I think, I've had lots of health problems ever since I was a kid. Used poor diet and all kinds of stuff. And I think when you have like operations when you're a kid and all that kind of stuff, you kind of it makes you see things a little bit differently. You appreciate things more. Every moment is a gift, so don't waste it.
It's a beautiful place to finish. You've been very generous with your time and your wisdom, and for those listening, I'd love you to go check out Johnny's work, and he's been incredibly modest about his real impact in the world, doing extraordinary stuff. So where's the best place for people to go find out more about you, or where do you hang out online?
So if people want to connect with me personally, then LinkedIn is the only social media personally that I use now. So just type my name, Johnny Pawlik. I think there's only one. I think there is only one on LinkedIn, so that's quite cool. And if they want to check out our business, all the things that we do, the people we support, go to www.mantrahq.com.
Okay. Johnny, thanks so much for your time. It's been a real treat to have this conversation, and we'll leave it there.
Pleasure and a joy.